All right. So we're still waiting for one more panelist, but I think we should go ahead and get started because we've got some intro data slides that we can take care of, and I'll just keep minding my phone to see if he appears. If not, we'll just keep going. But thank you everybody for being here. Welcome to this Wednesday webinar, Shifting the Mindset, Policy and Culture Review from those who understand fair chance hiring. My name is Antonio Gomez. I work for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support based out of Illinois State University. I am staff to the Career Pathways for Targeted Populations committee, which is a part of the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board, IWIB, CPTP, a lot of acronyms in there. We will try to not use acronyms today. If we do use an acronym, I will try to spell it out in the chat for everybody. We also have here Mark Lohman, who will be our facilitator today. He is the chairperson of the Justice Impacted Work Group, which is a subgroup of the CPTP. Lots of little things, but we don't need to get into that at that point. But he's wonderful. I will give us a brief introduction and some housekeeping, and then we'll get started. So a few housekeeping things. I will be your moderator and technical support. So I will be over here to the side, making sure that if anybody has any questions in the chat, they get addressed. I'll make sure that we aren't having any tech issues. Please hold all questions until the Q&A portion of the webinar, or if you don't want to hang on to your question until the Q&A portion of the webinar, you are free to use the chat to go ahead and post those. I can unmute you if you have a question once we have Q&A. This webinar is also going to be offering closed captioning, so feel free to turn that on if you'd like to. We'll be recording this webinar, which means that people can view this afterwards. A recording and all the materials, meaning this PowerPoint and everything, will be available within two business days on the Illinois Workforce Academy, and there is the link right there. So first thing that we want to do is we want to get started with some polls. So the first poll is going to be, where is your local area? So let me go ahead and launch that. I'll give people a couple of seconds. Right, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll and share the results. Not sure why it's not showing people's answers, but we're happy that you're here, regardless of where you're from. I'm not sure what's going on, but that's fine. We'll move on to the next one. I'll stop sharing. Give me a second. And which partner do you best represent? So let me go ahead and launch that poll as well. All right, we'll give people a couple of seconds to answer that question. Looks like a lot of Title I so far, which is the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Oh, I see Justin. Hello.
Hey there. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. All right, looks like we've got most of our answers. Oh no, yeah, there we go. So it looks as though most people are from Title I. We've got a couple of Title III, the Illinois Department of Employment Security. Title I is the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Title IV is vocational rehab, and then we've got other partners as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And take it away, Mark, whenever you're ready.
I am ready. I would like to thank all of our attendees today. I recognize quite a few of you who have joined us, so that is great. We have three presenters today, and I will briefly introduce each of them. Carlos is an attorney and a partner in the firm Klein, Thorpe, and Jenkins Limited. He's been practicing law for more than 25 years and has significant experience in representing clients in the areas of labor and employment law. He represents clients in state and federal court and in administrative proceedings before the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, the Illinois Department of Human Rights, the Illinois Labor Relations Board. He has served municipalities in McHenry and Lake counties, and he represents for-profit businesses and not-for-profit entities as well as individuals. He served as president of the McHenry County Bar Association and was president of the State Line SHRM chapter for human resources. He sits on the regional board of the Mercy Health System. Carlos was born in El Salvador, and he attended college and law school in Boston. He is fluent as a Spanish speaker as well as English. Craig is the director of human resources for National Tube Supply Company. He's responsible for human resources services across NTS's 8 locations. He's worked to streamline and drive efficiencies within the HR processes, including the implementation of the company's first applicant tracking system, automating the benefits process, and connecting employees electronically to their company data. And importantly, he's been developing alternative recruitment strategies to meet organizational challenges. Craig is passionate about workforce development and is active within his profession and community. He serves as the vice chairperson for the Will County Workforce Investment Board. He's on the personnel committee for Guardian Angel Community Services and is a business workforce lead for the Calumet Manufacturing Industry Sector Partnership. He co-chairs Career Pathways for Targeted Populations Committee of the Illinois Workforce Innovation Board, and where he's also a member of the Business Engagement Committee. He is a business representative on the board of Skills USA Illinois. Justin was 19 when he was sentenced to 16 years in prison for a decision that cost him the ability to grow up as a young adult. Years of being away from life outside had posed more barriers and adjustments than just getting a job. Unfamiliar with how the world worked, he was still determined to find his potential. He contacted the McHenry County Workforce Network when he was about to be released to get assistance with employment. Upon release, he met with a workforce professional to explore job opportunities. His original thought was to pursue a job and training as a tattoo artist using his skills. But further conversations and assessments with the Workforce Network identified other transferable skills that he possessed. Those skills led to career explanation and then to a work experience with the county as an administrative assistant intern in the McHenry County Workforce Office. During work experience, he completed the remaining credits to receive his associate's degree. He was also able to engage with job seekers that were referrals from the Illinois Department of Corrections and from county specialty courts to assist them in their employment plans. All of that experience came at a time when a position for a career planner opened at the Workforce Network. He was hired full-time in a new occupation, and his artist talent remained, but as a hobby. Currently, he has a job seeker caseload that is over 25% justice impacted clients. So Carlos, Craig, and Justin, we will take it away. And Antonio, if you want to lead with the questions.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of data slides ahead of the questions. So firstly, I want to point out why this is important. 1 in 3 American adults have some sort of criminal record. The jobs that they are able to find afterwards are often low skill, seasonal, temporary, or part-time, and they provide low wages and limited to no benefits. The average yearly income of post-release individuals is about $14K, which is not exactly, I mean, things are getting a lot more expensive. It's not really a livable wage. So that's a problem, and that's a talent pool that we want to be able to access. And we want you as workforce development professionals to be able to talk to employers about this talent pool. Why fair chance hiring? The highest paid workers in the sample were only around half as likely to return to prison as their non-employed counterparts, while the lowest paid workers were as likely to return to prison as those who found no employment at all. And we've got some graphs right here that we will send out after this is done if anybody wants to look at these in detail, but I'm not going to belabor the point as far as here, but some good data to look at afterwards. We also, in light of, as employers are finding out about SB 1480, which is the Employee Background Fairness Act, we want to, a lot of employers seem to be a little bit wary or confused or not sure exactly what the limitations are. And so we want to ease that sort of worry for them. Illinois recently enacted SB 1480, which, among other measures, effective immediately places significant restrictions on the ability of Illinois employers to refuse to hire a job applicant or take adverse action against a current employee based on the individual's criminal conviction record. These are often, while they tend to get denied just point blank, the restriction is really that it has to be something that is relevant to what they are currently applying for. And we want to make sure that employers know that because this is difficult to navigate, it shouldn't mean that it should just be off the table completely. But we'll get into this in a little bit. Skill equivalency. One of the things that we want to sort of move people to look at in their resumes is if they don't have a track record or recommendations or job histories or gap in employment, to evaluate character traits, to talk about their determination, integrity, coachability, their work ethic, and also the employment that they've been able to have within the DOC, the Department of Corrections, and talk about that as actual work experience, that it's not a job gap, that sort of situation. We want to make sure that people know how to fill out these job applications and make sure that employers are aware of what to be looking for to open their eyes in terms of who they would accept into these positions. We also want to highlight the work of Illinois reentry centers within Illinois. Programs like the Kewanee Life Skills Reentry Center out of Kewanee, Illinois, provide academic training. They provide pre-vocational and reentry related life skills, adult basic education, adult secondary education. They also have career and technical education, such as custodial maintenance, manufacturing, welding, cooking as well. And programs, not just like the Kewanee Life Skills Reentry Center, there are other programs such as forgetting the program at Richland, the Enrich, that provides life skills, that provides basic literacy and math training that allows people who come from reentry centers to not come with a blank slate. And I think that's an often perceived misunderstanding for employers. So without further ado, we've got our first question. Mark, if you want to take it away. Or would you like me to ask the questions? Either way is fine by me.
Go ahead. I'll let you do it, Antonio.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So first question for our panelists. Well, actually, if you would like to, I know that we did a brief introduction, but if there's anything that you would like to add before we get started, now would be the time. No? All right. That was a pretty thorough introduction, I have to say. So our first question for our panelists is, what are the employer's perceived risks, and how do those perceived risks differ from reality? How do you mitigate those perceived risks?
So I can kick this one off. As an employer, I think some of the things that the data in the previous slide showed is that some of the perceptions are that individuals will not come with skills, will not come with work ethic, will not come with those general employability skills. And what National Tube Supply has found as a justice impacted hire of individuals, that as we hire justice impacted individuals, we find that it's quite the opposite, because as the previous slide showed, they are gaining skills and employment while they are residents at the IDOC facilities, that they are gaining critical employability skills, and that the risk for turnover or quality issues or any employment issue is really no different than individuals that are hired off the street, is what we have found. And in fact, in some cases, when hiring from facilities such as Kiwani, who that have such extraordinary programs, that we find that there's even a greater success rate of these individuals. What we've done to mitigate these perceived risks is we've utilized success stories, we've utilized data, we've utilized fact as an organization rather than talking about perceptions, right? And kind of dispelling those perceptions as an organization has been critical in our journey. We make sure that we allow managers and individuals, though, to voice their concerns. We want to make sure they understand that they do have a voice and need to share what their concerns are. But we try to point to the data and success stories to dispel any of those perceptions.
To add to Craig, obviously Craig comes from the employer sector. I advise clients with respect to these issues, and one of the primary issues that comes up, or one of the often asked questions, has to do with potential claims that there might have been some negligence in the hiring of a person who is just as impacted, and what impact that might have. Certainly when there's that kind of claim, there's going to be certain things that a person making a claim would have to prove, specifically the duty to hire employees that are going not only to be competent, but good, good individuals, good employees. The plaintiff or whoever makes a claim would have to prove that there's been a breach of that duty, and that breach caused an injury, and ultimately that there's some recovery or damages to be had. So all those are the elements that would have to be proved. Obviously, when it comes to the duty to hire properly, there's a process that all employers go through. The due diligence, we'll discuss some of those issues as to how they apply for this particular sector of potential employees. But it is something that is often overblown, right? Because the assumptions are there and there's this concern. So long as you as employers and those in the sector have followed a process, there's less likelihood of any kind of claim being successful. Certainly, I can tell you that a claim, if there's going to be a claim, is going to be made no matter what, irrespective of what kind of employee you're dealing with, that an employee may potentially have or be just as impacted might be one component of whatever claim may be made, but there certainly will be other more critical issues, if you will. So I think that the process, of course, is one where you follow your procedures, you follow your hiring process, pursuant to what the statutes provide, what the SB 1480 provides, and all those kinds of things. There's less likely, the claim of a negligent hire is less likely to stick. But that's one of those perceived things. Other perceptions that are out there, obviously, is the likelihood that the individual employee is going to reoffend, and that's going to cause a problem. There might be something about less reliability. All of those are, in true to human nature, assumptions and thoughts and prejudicial things that we go through because of how society has worked. And as the statistics show, and as Craig has mentioned, when you start looking at the facts, the differences are, if anything, minimal, because you are more likely to, you're not going to have any more likelihood of this perceptions becoming reality when you deal with somebody who may be just as impacted as opposed to somebody who is not.
Excellent, Justin.
Yeah, so Carlos actually hit a lot of it on the head. But I would say that as a career planner, and actually didn't mention that it recently took on the title of a business service representative as well. Um, I deal closely not only with the justice impacted job seekers, but also part of this process is networking and connecting with employers, and in high hopes that these employers would be open to the idea of taking on an employee that does have a conviction. And although it's, I can't say that the perceived risk that these employers actually express are these specific things, because they don't tend to do so. Employers don't tend to say exactly, this is why I'm not hiring you. They don't tell the justice impacted individuals this. But when these individuals have these conversations with me, when the job seekers do, and they talk about the interview process and how everything went, it's usually that the interview went well, it was incredible. But when we got to the point where, they ask about background checks, the complete environment and the dialogue changes. And a lot of that, in my experience, comes from just absolute, it's human nature to, I guess, fear the unknown. So if we're dealing with an employer that has never knowingly hired on someone that has a criminal conviction, and then they receive this information, we fear the unknown naturally. So there is, what am I liable for as an employer? Is this person generally a good person? Right? Why do I take this person over the person that doesn't have this conviction? Um, and in my experience, that's usually the reason why some of these individuals don't obtain employment. And one of the advantages of our program, such as the internships, that give these job seekers the ability, to show employers who they are as a human being, their work ethic, their values, that usually changes their mind. But initially, it is usually that just apprehension from the beginning, the fear of the unknown. What if this person, goes back to prison? What if they have some sort of a incident here at our facility? So there's just so many layers to the apprehension of the employer, in my experience.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the business service rep title.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty recent.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
well,
thank you.
yeah, awesome. All right, let's move on to question number 2. What ROI or return on investment have employers, to your knowledge, experienced in fair chance hiring? And I'm going to go in the reverse order that we did last time. So Justin, I'm going to pick on you first. I think you're muted. Are you able to unmute? I'm gonna press the ask to
While
unmute. See if that.
Justin looks
Yeah,
at
yeah, go for it.
the unmuting, let me kind of at least bring the one that sort of stands out to me the most. And that is that when you hire a justice impacted individual, they are going to be less likely to quit on you. You think of the generational employees that we now have, like the people on the younger side. They tend to jump around a lot. And I think that that is less likely of an issue. And of course, when you're dealing with hiring anyone, you're going to go through the process of training. You're going to go through the process of bringing them on board and getting them to learn the skills and develop further skills that they have already. And that is an investment on your part as an employer for anyone that you bring on. And certainly part of what employers would like to do is to make sure that they are getting the benefits of that investment of training, of incorporating somebody into your company, into your workforce. And you would like that person to stay and develop and grow within your company and be a productive individual within it. and help you towards your bottom line. A person that is just as impacted if they have that opportunity when they come on board, they are going to certainly take advantage of it. They are going to reward you back by being loyal to you. It'll be more like, with our parents of that generation of the boomers, that they went to work for a company and retired from that company type of thing, right? That's sort of the biggest thing that I have noticed in just the literature and everything else. It is the loyalty that you will have because you have given this individual an opportunity to, turn the page, and they will continue to reward that with them staying on board. You can see Justin. Justin is an example of that. He is growing within his own, within the workforce and doing things and developing further skills and moving forward, moving upward within his agency.
Absolutely. Unfortunate that I couldn't unmute myself because again, took some of the words out of my mouth, but great point. In my experience, one of the biggest things is the level of appreciation and gratitude that the justice impacted have when an employer actually takes the quote unquote risk, right, to hire them on. The level of loyalty that these individuals have is just unparalleled. I mean, you're talking about someone who has spent significant time incarcerated and has worked on themselves, whether it is worked on their mental health, worked on their education, their professional development, and all they're looking for upon return home is a chance. They just need someone to give them a chance. And when someone does give them a chance, I mean, the level of gratitude, motivation, drive to show this employer that you made the right decision and I'm not going to let you down. In my experience, that is the biggest thing, the most common thread with the justice impacted job seekers is that when they are given that chance, they will do anything and stop at nothing to show you that you have made a great investment.
As an employer, I can tell you that, and that ROI actually translates to real dollars. I think there was a study done that the average cost of absenteeism is about $3,600 per hourly employee, about $2,700 per salaried employee, and that is a major cost that when you multiply that by the size of your workforce, that does truly, that level of appreciation, dedication, work ethic comes back in real dollars to an organization's bottom line. Not to mention the opportunity cost, as we are a for-profit business, right? If we don't have employees that are able to move the products in my background to our customers, we can't pay our employees. So having people on the team that show up each day and want to do the best they can translates to real dollars. Likewise, whether you're talking the cost of absenteeism, you could, very easily talk about the cost of turnover and how that number escalates very quickly depending on your onboarding practice, how much time it takes for training for somebody to ramp up, that those costs become significant. And in today's day and age where, as Carlos said, I don't want to pigeonhole just our young people, because I have seen in our environment, in the industrial environment, in the manufacturing environment, that the challenges with turnover and or absenteeism runs across many demographic areas. But one solution that I have found again is with justice impacted individuals can really drive that ROI up and help an organization.
Awesome. And I do have kind of a subsequent question for you, Craig. The 3,600 hourly, 2,700 salary for absenteeism, is that I'm assuming per employer or per employee or
So that's per employee, right? So
per
that's the
employee?
cost per year per employee,
All
right?
right.
So that's lost productivity when we look at numbers on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We have as absenteeism has risen, organizations have there's been an ongoing decline in productivity for organizations, and I think anecdotally one of those reasons there's a strong connection to absenteeism and turnover.
Hmm.
If I may also add here one thing
Yeah.
that occurred to me after, and that I had actually on my notes when I was kind of preparing for this panel. According to some numbers that Northwestern University, their Kellogg School of Management, and also the law school, they did a study, and they determined that 250,000 individuals or job applicants in for the sale and customer service jobs. That's what we have, who are part of this, the pool of individuals who are potential candidates, right? The numbers, and that's nationwide. And so then you're looking at a larger pool of employees when you consider your justice impacted candidates or applicants. The larger the numbers, right? Just by virtue of the fact that you expand your candidate pool, you're going to have more in terms of candidates. You're going to have more in terms of diversity, which is important as well. You are going to have a varied skill. Diversity is not just about the color of the person. It's also about the skill sets. It's about what they bring to the table, what experiences do they have. And certainly those are things that, that place you in a better position when you have that much of a larger candidate pool for all the folks that are, being released or, looking to have that opportunity. Just one more point I thought I had.
And Craig, did you have something to add to that or
Nope, I'm good.
no? All right. So actually, it looks as though this next question is something that you guys have already been talking about pretty extensively. So I just want to give you guys a little bit more space to see if there's anything that you wanted to add, and I'll just open the floor up to any of you. I should read the question. Sorry for people who are just listening to this. Are there intangibles that we don't think about in an ROI context that'll still benefit your company?
The thing that I think about as far as intangible ROI is it's not just the impact on that individual, right? It's the impact on the overall organization. Whether when you're hiring any untapped talent, frequently I also talk about hiring individuals with disabilities, or when I talk about just any DEI hiring practice, that as an organization, when you learn to manage in that environment, and you utilize management practices to raise up all populations, you kind of get an effect where a rising tide raises all ships, right? Is that you get better empathy in the organization, you get better communication, better goal setting, better teamwork when you look at those practices. So I think the impact, often we talk about the impact to the individual, right? And the ROI to the community as we prevent recidivism, because I do believe that the number one prevention of recidivism is employment, because it not only gives individuals an outlet, it helps give them all those support structures around them, such as income for food and shelter, all those basic Maslow hierarchy of needs thing, along with a community around them, uh, such as, fellowship in the workforce and that camaraderie. But it also extends to the employees around them. As you find biases starting to shift, you get greater tolerances for people's unique differences, and that's important. As Carlos said, we're so often, when we talk DE&I, we focus on just two aspects of it, whether it be race and or gender. And when we talk about equity and unique differences, that goes, kind of full circle. Every person is unique, and as we look to appreciate that and embrace that, I think that's something that really helps organizations become better, become stronger. It helps them become more resilient as they look to navigate through the marketplace.
Excellent. And I do want to also take this moment. You mentioned housing and those sorts of supports that are needed to plug our next webinar, actually. So this one is going to be a little bit more policy and culture based. Our next one is going to go into a little bit more of what supports are there that are available. So that was a nice little taste for the next one. Thank you for queuing that up really nicely. Carlos, Justin, anything else to add to intangibles?
Yeah, actually, so I had already mentioned, the level of gratitude and motivation, right? So I don't want to be redundant. But I will say that in terms of what an employer might be looking for, requirement wise, education wise, I mean, credentialism only goes so far. Obviously, work experience is important, transferable skills, but when we talk about intangibles, um, you can't teach attitude, right? Attitude is something that comes from within. And in my experience, the attitude of these individuals that are looking for a second chance is just unparalleled. And in addition to that, in terms of intangibles, it might be interesting for some of you to hear me say this, but I'm a firm believer that for these individuals that grew up or spent, significant amounts of time incarcerated, it creates a dynamic where you have to adapt to your environment. And part of that process is essentially being forced to interact with people from all over, the different areas, different cultures, different subcultures, different just completely different kinds of people that otherwise you might not have ever had to interact with on a regular basis. And it's kind of like a crash course in effective communication and conflict resolution, um, all things of that nature. You know what I mean? So I firmly believe, and I'm speaking from personal experience of myself and other individuals. So not everyone really emulates this, but there are many of those, such as myself, that took this experience as a learning experience to become the best version of yourself. So when you take an individual with that mindset that had this crash course in communication, as I mentioned, conflict resolution, so on and so forth, if you apply that to the work environment, I mean, these individuals have developed, whether they realize it or not, um, great leadership qualities, right? Extremely good, effective communication. They have the ability to perform under extreme pressure because they come from an environment of, high intensity and anxiety. So if we talk about intangibles, I mean, you're provided with an employee that has been exposed to environments that are so intense to where now they are extremely well equipped to work in an environment. And depending on your industry and occupation, it might change, but let's say manufacturing, for example, or the food industry, it could be anything, high intensity, high stress. We're dealing with somebody that is very, very well equipped for this job. Credentialism aside, this person has the attitude, the experience, and the motivation. So yeah.
It's like putting a SEAL as a security guard, right there, Justin? Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. I couldn't say it better myself. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd follow up to that actually. You were talking about is that something that happens because of the environment, or is there also, I mean, I'm assuming both, but is there also programming that individuals will receive in terms of those soft skills, that the attitude, the multicultural communication, conflict resolution, leadership, all that kind of stuff? Are there, like, for lack of a better word, courses or help?
Yes. So to answer your question, I mean, both. So no one in there is obligated to seek any type of cognitive behavioral therapy, anything of that nature. But it is available for those that actually seek it. So myself, I actually did. Some don't. But I will say that even for those individuals that did not actually actively seek out, these work groups, um, there are individuals that are just so mentally and emotionally intelligent that they know that they have to work on themselves, because needless to say, you have a lot of time on your hands to think and meditate and ponder, right? So there are resources to gain those skills and those experiences. And there are the individuals that have just taken it upon themselves to be mindful of those things and work on those things throughout the duration of their time. So,
Awesome. Thank you
yeah.
for that. Carlos, anything to add before we move on?
No, I think it's been covered. Obviously,
Right.
Justin speaks from his own personal experience, and I think I couldn't add to that. Let's just put it that way.
Well, Carlos, I'm going to have you start our next question. Can you discuss due diligence when conducting a background check during onboarding?
Yes, and obviously, we at the outset talked about the statutory changes to the Illinois Human Rights Act, what was called Senate Bill 1480. Actually, that went into effect in 2021, so it's been a while now. It should be in process, and employers should be a little bit more familiar with the process. You also may remember back in 2015, we had the ban the box, the boxing applications that asked the specific question of criminal convictions. That was out in 2015, and this became the next step. So in terms of the due diligence, and the process that you go through, what the law provides, and we briefly mentioned that it's a civil rights violation for any employer to use a job applicant or current employee's conviction record as a basis to refuse to hire an applicant, to deny a promotion to a current employee, or to take any adverse employment action against that individual, unless there is some specific law provision that says that you could do so. For instance, when we're dealing with the financial sector or banking, there's specific statutory provisions that just don't allow you to hire an individual that is justice impacted. But when that's not the case, you cannot use that issue, right? And so then the question becomes, what is your due diligence? What do you have to do? Well, when you essentially, what it does is that the question about somebody's criminal record or conviction record, you're not supposed to consider that until after the person has been found to be a qualified employee or an individual that you want to hire, right? So you go through that process, you essentially provide an offer, and then at that point in time, those questions come in having to do with the issue of the background checks and all those kinds of things, which invariably will produce a record of convictions. And so then once you determine that that's the case, the preliminary steps of course then becomes that you have to make an assessment of whether the record of the person involved, the justice impacted employee, whether there's a substantial relationship between that and the job that they're going to be performing, right? Is there going to be an issue there? And you have to essentially do a risk evaluation in an assessment of what that substantial relationship is. And so you have to ask yourself certain questions. You have to ask yourself about that individual. How long has it been since the conviction occurred, right? So the passage of time does have an impact on it. How many times? Was it just a one-time situation, or was something that there was several convictions throughout the person's history. You have to look at how severe the violation was, right? Certainly, most of us probably are familiar that there's different levels of crimes. You have misdemeanors, you have felonies. So there's a severity factor. Some things are, involve violence. Some crimes don't involve violence. Some might be, kind of property related types of situations. You also look at another one of the questions or factors that you have to look at has to do with the circumstances of whatever conviction happened. Right? We might be looking at an individual who is now in his 30s, but this happened when they were late teenagers or maybe even, adults, but yet it's still a teenager type of thing. So the age that the violation would have occurred. And you also look at what kind of rehabilitation has taken place, right? The individual would have served their time, quote unquote. They would have gone through a process. Justin has talked about, the work groups and the other things and the resources that are available to folks that are, incarcerated. In order to prepare them so that when they come out, they have kind of like a foundation of the things that they should be doing, of how they want to better themselves. So you have to look at all these factors in order to make a determination as to whether there is a potential reason why that person's criminal background or criminal conviction may prevent you from hiring them. What you do then is you have to send a preliminary decision, right? That what your decision is. So if you consider all those factors and they still seem to be an issue there, that person has to get notice of the fact that there's, that you're giving a preliminary decision that you are not going to hire or promote or whatever. And you have to give them an opportunity to respond to whatever these assessments are. So they might, because sometimes, believe it or not, the background checks that you get may not be accurate. They may not necessarily be, give you the full picture of what we're talking about here. And so you have to give that applicant for promotion or for a job the opportunity to essentially respond. This is no different than the credit process, right? When you're doing a credit check on somebody, you have to go that preliminary decision as to why there's a denial. They have to then give you some response. You take that information, the response, you give them the opportunity. That would be the next step to respond. They do so, and then you make the final decision, right? So what the statute has done is essentially compel employers to go through a little bit more of a process to make the decision, so that you are not doing the automatic, what used to be in the old days, the moment you see a conviction, they're out. You're not even considering anymore. So you wouldn't take into account all those factors that are now part of the statute that allow you to make an informed decision, and one that takes into account the individual's history in the process. That's kind of what I would say is the due diligence you have to go through in the process. You have to evaluate the full picture as opposed to just one segment of the record kind of thing, right? You have to evaluate what happens after, what's happened since, how long has it been? And if you do that, then you're complying with the statute, but also you're getting an opportunity. I think the benefit of it is that you get an opportunity to get to know that individual more in depth, and so that hopefully you then become more open to the opportunity for that individual to do it.
Carlos, really good mental flow chart. Yeah. Sorry.
Just to add on to that, Carlos, I think the opportunity, particularly for the workforce system, as I look at individuals on this call, is my experience as an HR professional, unfortunately, is it's HR professionals are the ones that are doing the discrimination, because they are the ones running the background check, oftentimes depending on the size of the organization, and not understanding the new laws. So I think as a workforce system, we have to be we have an opportunity to educate businesses and HR individuals out there. So that is part of, I believe, that due diligence, particularly as it pertains to the workforce system, is partnering with your local SHRM chapter, your Society for Human Resource Management chapter, making sure that they understand all the aspects surrounding not just background checks, but hiring justice impacted and all the ROIs that we just spoke about. Talking to our chambers of commerce and making sure, that those individuals, because a lot of times those chambers are made up of large employers, but also small employers where that sole proprietor is the CEO, the purchasing manager, the HR manager. They're wearing 5 to 10 different hats and may not be aware of some of the things that you talked about, Carlos. So I think as a workforce system, we have an opportunity to help dispel some of those myths and educate on what the legal process is and some of the pitfalls that they need to that the individuals need to think about.
All right, Justin, anything to add?
So yeah, just briefly, because I know I don't want to get too far into, resources and services. That's the next one. But I will say, in terms of just the discussion of due diligence when conducting background checks from the career planning perspective and working with the justice impacted closely, I understand that it's extremely important to do the assessment piece to get a clear understanding of this job seeker's specific situation, including what are the details of their criminal conviction, and then really analyzing and taking into consideration the information that Carlos was giving regarding, the criteria that an employer needs to take into consideration. So when they decide to either hire someone with a conviction or not. So we want that information ahead of time so we know what is the employer going to consider when they're saying yes or no, and then how can we, pretty much stack the odds into your favor. Well, the way we do that is, first of all, we analyze, does this conviction and the details of it, does it have any relevance? Is it thematic in any way in terms of conflict to the occupation and the specific, job description? So are we going to give a bank robbery? Are we going to say that someone that was convicted of bank robbery, are we going to try to get them into a bank? No, right? We want to find something where the employer will not be apprehensive about the conviction being tied to what this employee is going to be doing. In addition to that, also it's important that employers understand that, as Carlos mentioned, they'll be able to have a discussion, right, about this when the background check is done. And there are certain things, and as Carlos mentioned, when they run a background check, the information provided might not necessarily be a true representation of the actual incident that led this individual to become incarcerated. For example, I'll talk to some of my justice impacted job seekers about the conviction, and it could be essentially any crime, but they actually weren't the ones that carried out the specific act, whatever that act may be. But they were there. It might have been a group of friends. And in the state of Illinois, we have the law of accountability that says if you were with your friend and your friend went and did this, you were with him, you didn't stop him or her, therefore you are also responsible. Again, not to minimize the offense, but it is important, if that is the case, for an employer to understand that, yes, I was convicted of this, charge, but I actually wasn't the one that actually carried this out. I had a very, very poor choice of friends, and for lack of better judgment, I am where I am today. And then also, really coaching these guys on taking accountability for their actions and expressing regret. And then Carlos mentioned, what have you been doing since? And that's where I really step in, and we're going to show this is what we've been doing since, right? And we can talk about those things that we do to prepare these job seekers for employment um, when we talk about resources and services.
All right. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. This might have been from a previous question from Yahaira Vargas. The first one is, does this mean that the sector may need to adjust the idea or standard created that people are dispensable? We need folks who are highly trained in sectors, and oftentimes leaders tend to act like folk are easily replaceable. This attitude needs an adjustment to assist ROI. So it sounds like the question is, and Yahaira, you can let me know if this is incorrect, that how do we maybe change people's attitudes towards the dispensability of people?
I think generally the process, and I think this sort of goes into the next area, the next question as well. It has to do with education, and training, right? We've have processes, employers have processes of training and education for their workforces. The one way to address that would be to essentially incorporate this area into the training, because it does then allow the workforce as a whole to understand the dynamics, to understand the issues, to understand the value of employees, those that are just as impacted as opposed to those that are not. And I think that in that process, certainly that will have it will give the opportunity for individuals to get a better feel for their colleagues who may have a background that they have, that their life experience is different. Again, this is one of those aspects. We talked about diversity and how we become better for it, right? We don't know what we don't know type of thing, and the more we are exposed and educated on the aspect of it, and that applies to the workforces, the more likely we are to understand and relate better to people, and see the differences and note that while there may be differences in our experiences, there are also common threads and bonds that kind of gets us together. We all have a goal. We all have an objective to be productive, to make our company better. We have that investment kind of thing that is a collective investment. And I think that the education process allows everyone to sort of get a better sense for it. So I think that that's one of those things that potentially addresses the question. Yes, that'll change the attitudes, but then also kind of bleeds into the next question. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I don't know if there's any other folks that have, if Craig or Justin have any other thoughts on this.
No, because like you said, it'll lead into the next questions.
Yeah, it does lead into the next question. And in the interest of time, I will read the next question that she had as more of a statement. The attitudes or responses of other issues not addressed, or the manner which folks engage with them as well. Sometimes cultural differences are indirectly read as negative attitudes. That second part, I think, is very important to note. But I am going to move on to the next question because we want to make sure that we have time for the last two questions. I also will say I did kind of speak incorrectly. The chat is open for panelists and only panelists. The way to ask a question, which Yahaira figured out, is in the Q&A section. If you don't see it immediately, it'll be in the three little dots at that bottom little scroll part of your Zoom screen. So thank you, Yahaira, for getting that started. All right, next question. What suggestions do you have for employers regarding the eventuality that other employees learn that a new hire is justice impacted? How do you ensure that justice impacted employee feels welcome and supported? I'm actually going to pick on Craig because I know that he has a story, and it's a very good story, and I think people should hear it.
Yeah, so I had this exact issue come up within our organization. And, one of the things that I start out doing when anybody on my team is hiring an individual that is justice impacted is, number one, we share with them that it is their story, right? That's not information that HR is going to share with people. If they choose to share it, that is up to them. But I do educate them very realistically that there are going to be people that have biases. And as a result of that, if you choose to share, you may be faced with some of individuals' biases, and we will address that appropriately in the workplace because we promote everybody, treating people equally and fairly. But in this situation where we hired somebody that was incarcerated for murder, they spent 30 years in prison, um, and our warehouse manager was very concerned when we put this person on shift of what the other employees were going to think, right? And how that was going to be perceived, and that everybody was going to be upset and walk out. Well, about 2 to 3 months after hiring this individual, we were in a meeting up in our front office here, and the manager shared with me that this individual did end up sharing with his shift that he was incarcerated and what he was incarcerated for. And I promptly asked the question: "Is oh wow, so what happened next? Did people walk out that night? Did we have a mass exodus? I didn't get a report." And he's like, "No." I said, "Did anybody quit and not come back?" And he said, "Well, no." And I said, "Oh, good." And I walked away because the point is, what we don't realize is, I think, those ROIs we were talking about earlier of work ethic, loyalty, showing up, particularly in the workplace, though, that is what teammates are looking for, right? People that are engaged and doing their best each day. And I think when people pause, although they might have some initial biases, I think when you educate a workforce and you educate managers to the fact of what happened and maybe the context, that when I know personally, when I've talked to a number of individuals, they shared that they've been incarcerated since being a teenager, that maybe it was the result of their environment and gang violence that led them to be incarcerated, and now they've over time have obviously are no longer in the gang, maybe have gotten educated, has gotten other types of counseling, has found religion, uh, and now they're looking to be part of their family again. When individuals hear those things and reflect upon the fact that in some of these cases, it are things that happened 5, 10, 15, or in this case 30 years ago, that if you pause and think about it, uh, it helps to lower those barriers, right? And those biases. So what I look to do is really share with people that we should treat everybody with respect. We all have differences. Um, we've all have made mistakes or have family members that have made mistakes. I have a brother that probably should have been incarcerated multiple times, but people didn't pull the quote unquote trigger on that, right? Um, so we all may have things that we aren't proud of, or things that we screwed up and didn't get caught. Um, but people have moved past that. So I try to share that journey, that they've they've done their repentance, if you will. They've done their corrections, and they are here because they are looking to move forward positively and be a part of the community and be a part of their families' lives and be, a contributing member of society. So I think those things and reminding employees that that's the way we have to treat every employee, regardless if they're justice impacted, if they're your next door neighbor, if they're a family member in a small family organization. If you abide by those same principles, that you will create that environment that is welcoming and supported.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I love that story. Yep. Mhm.
I would just add, I think in some respects, part of the process, Craig has, touched on that, the issue of the golden rule, really, right? You want to treat others the way you want to be treated. And that is part of our training when we train employers on, employees, how to deal with diversity in the workplace. If you think about those that are justice impacted, that is just one more, and now in Illinois, according to the Illinois Human Rights Act, one more protected classification that exists, right? And so the goal and the idea is that you consider this individuals no different from individuals that may have other differences, that may have that may bring something different to the table, whether it's, again, the gender part, the color of their skin, their cultural differences, their ancestry, etc. I mean, we're talking about the same things. So if we are conducting that training that we are, obligated to do pursuant to other provisions of the Illinois Human Rights Act, then this is just one other component. And so the education on it, that's part of the process, also, helps you to manage your workforce, and it should allow you to make sure that you are protecting all individuals, and that to the extent that there are those individuals within our workforce that do not want to see past those differences, then certainly there may be a need to look into that, to investigate a complaint, to deal with it no different than you would if there was any other kind of claim of harassment or like, because of the negative impact that allowing something like that to continue might have in your overall workforce.
All right, Justin, anything to add?
Yeah, so briefly, I mean, in terms of suggestions to the employers about, their other employees realizing eventually that, a new hire might have a conviction, I will frankly say that I'm a I'm a big advocate when dealing with my justice impacted clients, that I recommend that they don't voluntarily, just provide that information to their fellow employees in the work environment. Just because, as we know, there is stigma. Every single one of, the employees in an environment, they're different people with different thoughts, different views, different opinions. So just to prevent any potential conflict, I do recommend that my job seekers, when they do find employment, just don't voluntarily give that information out. But under, there are times where it happens, right? Employees find out one way or another. So I would just definitely say, just to touch on what Carlos was mentioning, just the employer, they need to make sure that they're promoting a positive work environment where individuals are focused on, unity, teamwork, camaraderie, understanding. And in an environment like that, I will say that the justice impacted individuals, in my experience, tend to thrive in a work environment like that. When we talked about intangibles, I forgot to mention, I had to note that one of the biggest intangibles with the justice impacted, in my experience, are the level of camaraderie that these individuals develop and how seriously they take that camaraderie. Um, Turning a negative into a positive, especially these individuals with gang-related backgrounds where they grew up with thinking distortions that, this is my family and I'm absolutely loyal to them. Obviously, that led them down a wrong path. Um, But in the actual environment of being incarcerated and working on yourself and trying to become the best person that you can be, what they say, birds of a feather flock together. So those types of individuals that are thinking like that tend to gravitate toward one another. And again, they develop that sense of camaraderie and unity to the extent where when you transition into a work environment with an employer that took a risk and a chance on you, and now you're working with employees that you socialize with every day, naturally that camaraderie kicks in. So to answer your question, if the employer can somehow promote an environment of unity, then the justice impacted individuals tend to thrive in that kind of environment because that's their language. We have a common interest here. We're here every day. We're interacting. We're laughing. We're problem solving together. So as long as it is promoted to have that kind of environment, that should remedy any potential issue from occurring in the workplace.
Excellent. And I do see that Lucas Robinson posted a question in the Q&A. I'm going to save that for the Q&A portion because we've just got one more question to go. Our final question, how do you find employer mentors along the way? Or how do you help people find employer mentors along the way?
So I think the best way to do it is holding, people on this call accountable, right? People, our workforce system is talking to employers every single day, right? And helping educate people and connect those employers. I've found locally it's hard, even being on my local workforce board, to ask that question and share who are other employers that are justice impacted friendly. And I find in some cases those employers don't want to be that forward and raise their hand because they feel that they might be judged as an organization. But I think there is that opportunity for our workforce system to somehow chronicle that information and help like employers hook up together to share successes, to share missteps, and to act as mentors to one another. So I think that's utilizing this platform in our workforce system is probably one of the best ways to do that. Secondly, something that the workforce system can do is run education and see who shows up to those webinars and whatnot, and again, bring people together, right? You have a company like National Tube Supply and myself who would happily talk to another organization and mentor them. I'm sure there's many other organizations out there in each of our workforce professionals communities that are just like National Tube Supply and have had successes on this journey. So running those webinars and pairing those people together, or running a job fair for justice impacted individuals, and looking at those organizations that show up to that, and bringing those individuals together, and utilizing those as success stories. So
Excellent. Anything else to add?
I can jump in here briefly. I would say that in terms of finding employer mentors along the way, I mean, as we mentioned, certain employers are just so apprehensive about second chance hiring. I think it's extremely important to really promote the success stories. I know some employers don't want to promote the fact that they have hired individuals with convictions. But as Craig mentioned, the success stories are a big factor within the community for other employers to see. Especially, I mean, I've witnessed and experienced firsthand justice impacted individuals starting with an employer as an intern, and eventually making it all the way into a management type of position. because of all of the things that we've discussed previously. So if other employers can realize that and network with other employers, SHRM, webinars, things of this nature, if this information can be shared and promoted and shown in a positive, I think that's an extremely effective way to spread that message and encourage that.
Yeah, good point. Always highlight success stories. All right. So we've arrived at our final section. We have any other questions? We do have one question in the Q&A. If anybody would like to ask their question live, they can also raise their hand and I can unmute them. We have until 11:30 for this webinar, so I will try to give us 5 minutes to kind of give final thoughts and wrap up. But the first question that we have is from Lucas Robinson. It says, I often see that returning residents are excellent employees, but are more susceptible or vulnerable to unscrupulous worksite practices from employers and coworkers. What strategies are best to advocate for them at their places of employment?
So I think of a couple things as I think of that. Number one thought is find an employer that isn't doing unscrupulous work practices, right? When I go into whether it be Kewaunee or Statesville or go out to other events, so many individuals are looking just for a job, that quick job to start making money. And each time we do interviews, whether I'm talking to hourly people or I'll tell you the last couple days I've been talking to outside salespeople. We start out with saying, "Hey, we're gonna have a conversation, and the fit is as important for us to like you as it is for you to like us. So make sure that as an employee, you're doing the due diligence or encouraging justice impacted people to do due diligence, that they're going to work for an employer that understands the circumstances that brought them where they are today, right? And how that's made them more resilient and that they respect that, right? I think that's key. I also feel, in some cases, depending on those practices, it's just against the law. Quit breaking the law. So, unfortunately, some people I'm not, as because oftentimes as the head of human resources, I'm the one that has to write the employer response to claims, whether it be to the Department of Human Rights or the EEOC or what have. But in some cases, some employers need to learn those hard lessons. And that's why we have certain laws. And I think that it starts with having a conversation, asking for that respect, sharing why that respect is deserved. And if it continues, there are laws to protect individuals. So I think at times, sometimes we do have to leverage those, unfortunately.
I would simply note that I think that obviously I alluded to training being an important aspect of any workforce in maintaining a effective, cohesive, fair place of employment. And I think that is obviously an across the board interest for all your your employees. And if you do that, then certainly that will help you to address some of the issues, from from the co-workers, to the extent that there may exist any. I would hope, that the employers are not playing those games, but certainly there are those that might, and as Craig has said, that'll be the kind of thing where, there are laws that protect all types of employees, and at some point in time there might be a consequence about that. And so, that hopefully will be resolved in some fashion. But if it deals, if you're talking about employee on employee kind of thing, then I think the training is critical.
Justin, any thoughts to add?
Honestly, I think you two both hit it on the head. I mean, yeah, we talked about the employer's responsibility of encouraging an environment of understanding and camaraderie. But not every situation is perfect. So yeah, and I think both of them hit it on the head, and not to mention making sure that the justice impacted individuals that are finding these employment opportunities know about like the Equal Opportunity Act and things of that nature, so that they can be equipped to handle that situation as well. So.
Excellent, thank you. I do want to highlight, so currently in the Q&A, there is a resource that's posted by Rayson Grant, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name, but it says, just sharing information. These are applications that help job seekers find background-friendly employers, such as honestjobs.com and with verified hiring. And then there's also a Bing search that's attached. So I will go ahead and put that in the answered section. And do we have any other questions? I can go ahead and look at here to see if anybody raises their hands, or post it in the Q&A, whichever you feel more comfortable with, but I can unmute you if you like. We got a question from Norma Rodriguez. Is there a phone number or websites for customers that were turned down because of their criminal background to report these employers?
So I personally will say
Carlos,
that I'm not aware of one. I would love to know that information if it does exist.
I don't have the number handy, but I think that if obviously the Illinois Department of Human Rights would be the one to address these issues. Whatever's happening, if you could just go to the website, any individual candidate could go to the website and look at what the process entails, what the law at issue that we've been discussing requires, and they will take your information and create a charge. And certainly that'll be the kind of thing that eventually will get to, once there's the processes follow for that charge, then that eventually gets to the employer that may be engaged in the inappropriate practices or practices that potentially violate the statute. So yes, Illinois Department of Human Rights, look that up. That'll get you how to file a charge, and you can get that information.
Correct. I was going to say the state DOL, the Illinois Department of Human Rights, background checks, when you conduct them, they are covered by the Fair Credit Act. So that's where Carlos was talking earlier, where as an employer, if I'm going to take adverse action, there are steps that I need to follow to click a pre-adverse action so that the individual can get a copy of what I'm making a decision on, or what I'm taking that adverse action based on. Along with that, there are a summary of rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Many people think it just pertains to credit, but it's really any I think they call it, the technical language is investigative or investigatory background check. So that pertains to both the criminal side and the monetary credit side.
All right, thank you guys so much. Justin, anything to add?
No, yeah, I think that's pretty much the primary information for that scenario. So
yeah, that's pretty thorough. All right, so I'm actually going to close the floor for questions, unless we've got a quick one right before. We have about 5 minutes, a couple of seconds. All right. So I do want to thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Mark. I also see a couple of people on the call who were a part of organizing this. And I very much want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart. This has been fantastic. I want to give you guys a couple of minutes before we close out to have any final thoughts. I'll start with Craig.
So I think my final thought is something that Mark Lohman has taught me and brought me into this environment where I believed in it, and now I live it, and I'm an advocate for it. The fact that 94 to 98% of people incarcerated will be released from incarceration. And I know personally and professionally, I want to do what I can to help ensure that people, when they come back into our communities, that they have the opportunity to be a meaningful part of that community. So the more that we promote that attitude, that mindset, I think the better off that we will be as businesses, and the better off that we will be as a society as well. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Craig, too. Justin, do you have any final thoughts? Or Carlos, either way. Either way's fine.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you everyone for attending and those that participated in the planning. I think if anything, the biggest takeaway that I hope that those that attended will have is that they, the fact of the matter is, me personally advocating for the Justice Impacted. Employers might not realize this, but you have the ability to change lives to the extent that just really changes the dynamic of these justice impacted individuals' lives, not only their lives, but for those that strive to be the best fathers they can be, the best husbands. The employers are the ones that give them that golden ticket. And I don't know if employers realize what kind of an impact they have on these individuals. So I hope that this webinar gave a level of clarity and understanding to the extent that, shifted the mindset, ideally. So.
Good use of the title. Love that. Carlos, any final thoughts before we close out?
The only final thought that I would have is that, I appreciate Craig and Justin for their participating and being a panelist in this type of presentation. And as I have often heard when I am participating in any kind of panel or discussion, when there's nothing further to say, just say, I am complete. So I hope that you are all complete, having had the opportunity to be a part of this panel and this presentation. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you all very much for being here, and thank you, panelists, again. We will, as we said previously, have a second webinar that is more focused on justice impacted employee supports. We have everything planned. We're just kind of getting schedules together, and it'll probably be sometime early next year. These are some of the questions that we're going to address. We have 1 minute, so I'm not going to read them. I do want to point out a few resources that we've gathered. A lot of these are more of the why of why this is important. And we also have a little bit more information on the Kiwanee Life Skills Reentry Center. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's the last one. The last thing that we want to do is that we want to point out that the people who are on this call are a resource to you within, obviously with Measure. Everybody here is very busy. We don't want to spam anybody's email, but Carlos, Craig, Justin, Mark as well are incredible resources to have, and I'm very privileged to have been able to come in contact with all of you. Last thing, thank you. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Any final, pretty much wrapped up final thoughts, but any last things that we want to say before we log off? Mark, too, if you have anything to say.
Thank you and goodbye.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great, great day.
I am complete.
All right. Goodbye. We're all complete.